Hello, I was born in 2001 and I'm on a mission to experience games that existed before I did. Today I'm diving into a bunch of titles that were released throughout the 90s. The majority of them were recommendations that I found in the comments section, so if you have any recommendations of your own, please drop them below. Chrono Trigger and Quake were a couple of the big ones. Some quick disclaimers: these are my personal preferences. I'm not here to tell you whether a game is good or bad, just what I think of them. And they're my first impressions only. I'm not playing them for more than a couple hours. I've got quite a long list of games I want to try, and I may return to some others down the line for longer playthroughs. One quick final thing before we begin: if you're interested in more retro gaming content, check out Ravensoup. He does funny skits, game hauls and live streams all around retro games. He's currently streaming a playthrough of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I'll shove links in the description and in the top right, that little card thing. Tell him Matt sent you so I can invoice him the correct finder's fee. Anyway, on to game number 1. Age of Empires 2 released in 1999. However, this is the definitive edition that released in 2019. There's a couple of reasons why I'm trying this instead of the original. One is because it was just way easier to get my hands on, and two, this definitive edition has been hailed as possibly one of the greatest remasters of all time. Now, I could have also chosen to go with the first Age of Empires because that too has been remastered and is pretty easy to get a hold of. Having said that though, I went with the second installment because the general consensus seems to be that it was just better, both the original and the remaster. Before you get upset, I'm just going off of what I could find online, and I don't intend to try multiple games from the same series. Seriously, I've got 5 Final Fantasy titles on my list and I'm only going to try one. I don't know which one yet, so you can argue about that in the comments. I may come back to try other entries in a series I've already tried, but that would be in the far, far future, because I've already got a long enough list of games to try without going through every entry in every series. Anyway, on to the empire building. I know most of the basic stuff when it comes to an RTS or strategy game like this. Gather materials, create units, build buildings and whatnot. However, I still like to go through the tutorials because it's the only way I'm going to be guaranteed somewhat competent. This feels even more important when looking into older games, since the standards that my generation has come to expect might not have been relevant yet. Maybe not so much with this, since it's a 2019 remaster and therefore any dated elements have probably been smoothed over a little bit. After getting through the basics of collecting stuff and building up a force, I made a start on the fighting focused tutorials. The first was to collect some relics and the second was to destroy a castle. I enjoyed the second one quite a bit. It kind of threw me into a game that skipped the early game stuff like getting a few basic buildings set up and left me in a position to build an army and start fighting. Which is exactly what I did. I built a castle, trained some special fighters, built up my numbers and even grabbed a battering ram. This is when some cool dudes arrived by boat. I think I missed some narration that explained why they were here, but oh well. My allies' boat came in real handy because they could transport a bulk of my fighting force behind the enemy walls, letting them get to work destroying stuff while the remainder of my troops escorted my siege equipment up through the gate. And this is why I like a good strategy game, building up an army, making a plan and executing it. Now, obviously I'm not the best RTS player. There was probably way quicker ways and smarter ways to do what I did, but I still had a fantastic time. Plus, I'm not really a PvP player, so I'm only ever going to play against AI. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy a fun party game with friends, but I prefer the more laid-back feeling that comes with fighting bots over fighting strangers. Knowing that I can pause the game when I get hungry or need the toilet, and also knowing that the AI is tunable so I can craft the perfect level of challenging for me. Some of you may strongly disagree, but that's what is great about games like Age of Empires. I can play my way, and you can play your way. Back to the actual gameplay. I destroyed the enemy castle and finished the introductory campaign. Instead of going straight into another campaign, I thought I'd try out the skirmish mode. I spent some time setting up the AI players, adjusting settings, and selecting a civilization. I chose the Slavs and I selected my ally to be the Scots. The enemies I just left as random. The only other things that I changed were the game speed, starting resources, and map exploration. This was mainly so I could speed through the early setup of setting up some resource gathering while also be able to kickstart some important buildings. If I had to start another skirmish, I would likely leave the starting resources and map exploration on standard, but I had just gotten through the tutorial and I was keen to get stuck into another fight. And away we went. The enemy AIs ended up being the Tartars and Bengalis, I don't know if I pronounced them right, I kicked things off with some houses, a barracks and a mill so that I could spawn more villagers and train some troops just in case of an early attack. Next came a lumber camp, a mining camp and a few farms. Food always seems to be a major bottleneck for me, so I created a handful. I also placed down another mine before spotting my first relic. We'll come back to that later. And soon enough we were in the feudal age. Yellow paid a visit and I began construction of yet more farms and a market so that a trade route with my ally could be set up. I shoved a watchtower on my eastern border since that's where my closest enemy was camped, and immediately decided that wasn't enough and started work on wall. The blacksmith came next, and not only did it unlock a bunch of upgrades, but it also unlocked the castle age advancement. I also built a dock, but I completely forgot about it, so it just sat there untouched for the remainder of the game. The castle age unlocked the monastery, so I could finally create some monks and steal some relics. I had found 2 by this point, so I nabbed them both. I also finished walling myself in, built a castle and trained a load more troops. After placing down yet more farms, I received a message from a red enemy offering an alliance in exchange for 200 of each resource. I felt that I could spare the cost, and having this become a 3v1 sounded hilarious, so I sent over the resources, swapped him to ally, and he immediately just requested more wood. This would become a regular occurrence. Seriously, this guy would ask for wood every few minutes. I considered wiping out his civilization just to shut him up. Anyway, I reached the Imperial Age and decided this was a great time to push against Yellow, a close neighbour and my only remaining enemy. This went very well. I demolished his castle and most of his city before Green showed up to help me finish off the last few stragglers. And that was that. Like I said before, my next skirmish would likely play out quite different because I would tweak the settings to be a little more difficult. Overall, Age of Empires is a series that I'd never tried before, and I'm glad that I finally got the chance to give it a go. I will definitely be returning. I might even grab the Roman DLC and see how long it takes me to get stabbed by a bunch of senators. Carmageddon 2 Carpocalypse Now, say that 5 times fast, is a quite violent 1998 racing game that drew criticism for its, well, violence. However, it also gained a loyal following that still remembers it fondly and even recommends it to a random stranger on YouTube nearly 3 decades later. And then that random stranger makes a way too messy joke about it and proceeds to call it by the wrong name. Cars 2 Electric Boogaloo introduced some significant upgrades to graphics, physics and balancing, alongside some new weapons and power-ups. The game is structured into groups of levels that consist of 3 standard levels, followed by a sort of final special mission thing. The standard levels are won when the player completes one of 3 objectives, passing through all the checkpoints before the time runs out, wrecking all opposing vehicles, or by killing every pedestrian in the level. I can see why it's a little controversial. The special missions have specific tasks that need to be accomplished to then unlock the next group of levels. These tasks could include destroying something specific like a cargo ship or eliminating a boss style enemy. There's probably a few more examples, but I'm not listing them all out. The first level was mostly just me getting used to the controls and the vehicle handling. The default controls for the keyboard were near impossible for me to get my head around. Trust me, I tried, but in the end I hooked up my Xbox controller and got it set up with some community mapping. I know that this means I'm not experiencing the exact same thing as players did in '98, but I think it allowed me to appreciate the game's design and the engine's capabilities without the constant hurdle of forgetting which keys reset and which keys repair and which keys use power up and which key opens the map. Plus there was a PS1 port released in '99, so I imagine the controls on that being somewhat improved. Plus I'm just much more comfortable with the controller in general. If the game has controller support, I will take advantage. The vehicle handling did feel a little floaty at times. I felt like I really had to slow right down just to take a corner without sliding off the track. And I know that this isn't really played like a racing game, it's more like a demolition derby, but just trying to navigate the world at a reasonable pace felt very difficult. Having said that, I'm aware that there are a variety of cars to unlock that each have different stats, and of course the focus is slapstick violence, not racing simulation. I also spent some time trying to figure out what all these crates did and how different abilities worked. They were pretty fun. The mine shitting was by far my favourite. They were powerful and made a little fart noise every time you dropped one. Simple but effective humour. I actually took out most of the other racers using mines except for the first guy that I launched off a cliff and this fellow that decided the world could use one less tree. With the final opponent eliminated, I'd nabbed my first victory alongside 10,000 bonus credits for completing the level, and minus 14 million bonus credits as a time bonus. Wait, what? I managed to speed through level 2 much quicker, destroying all opposing drivers in like 5 minutes as opposed to the 20 it took me on the previous level. Level 3 was a similar story, and it was onto my first mission. I didn't like the first mission. It was just a plain old timed race through my least favourite map so far. No opponents, no need for power-ups, just a race with people on the track. I didn't enjoy it. Once that was done with, it was back to the usual, smashing and bashing and explosions and loveliness. I also really enjoyed the new map with destructible scenery like the windows. It was glorious. I actually bought a new car here too, the Razorback, because it was advertised good offensive capabilities. I tried it for about 10 minutes on the next level and decided that I preferred the default. The final regular level of this section was not too much different to the rest, so I managed to get through it pretty quickly, and it was on to special mission number 2. I didn't like this one either. The task was to destroy 11 satellite dishes spread across the rooftops, but once I fell off a roof it took way too long to get back up again. After watching a video of someone completing it, it doesn't look too hard if you can hit the jumps at a good pace, but it just kind of seemed dull compared to the normal levels. Overall, I had a lot of fun on the normal levels, and I think there's cheats that let you skip some of the special missions, but this game only has 40 levels, and from what I can find online, all of the special missions are pretty bad. So that's 10 out of the 40 missions just skipped or slogged through because they're not fun. It's like having an advent calendar, but a quarter of the days are American chocolate. The Lost Vikings was Silicon and Synapse's first major success, or as we might know them today, Blizzard Entertainment. You know, the place that guy worked for 7 years but he totally never talked about it. You know, the studio that merged with Call of Duty people and were then bought by the computer people for just shy of $69 billion. God damn. Anyway, The Lost Vikings is a 2D puzzle platformer that released in 1993. At least I think so. There's a couple sources that cite 92 as the release year, but the consensus seems to agree on 93. If you disagree, then please remember that I was still 8 or 9 years away from existing, so I have no idea which is correct. Feel free to argue in the comments. It was loved for its challenging puzzles, charming characters, humorous writing, and novel co-op gameplay. Speaking of charming characters, the 3 Vikings are Eric the Swift, who can run, jump, and ram through walls, Baleog the Fierce, who can swing his sword or fire an arrow, and Olaf the Stout, who has a shield. Doesn't sound as cool as the others, but he's essential. Because I don't have any friends, I played it solo, and actually ended up enjoying it more than I thought I would. The basics didn't take too long to grasp thanks to these helpful question mark, hint, block things, and the puzzle element of trying to figure out who needs to be where and when was pretty unique. It kinda reminded me of The Cave, another puzzle platformer that offered great co-op opportunities. The first level took a couple of attempts, as I was still getting used to what each of the characters could do, and I didn't realise that they all had to survive. I thought that the game not entering a fail state as soon as the first character died meant that I could progress as long as at least one of them made it to the exit. Obviously, I was wrong. You need all 3 to progress, and now that I look back, I reckon it doesn't end, so that you can kind of have a look around and see where you went wrong and plan ahead before restarting the level. The enemy variety felt pretty basic, and I'm not too surprised. It was 1993, and the enemies still had to allow the players to plan around them. You know, Olaf has to be able to block their attacks and whatever else. Overall, it's got some fun puzzles that make use of all 3 characters fairly well. But I think if I was to return, I would bring a friend. Or 2. The Blizzard Arcade Collection version allows for up to 3-player co-op. Just gotta find some willing participants. Or unwilling participants. Quake is a 1996 first-person shooter developed by id Software, who were also responsible for Doom, so I went into this with high hopes. One of the major advancements that contributed to Quake's popularity was its use of polygon-based models in a truly 3D engine, for everything from characters and weapons to the levels and environments that the player traverses. This meant that the world felt even more immersive, especially now that the player character could look up and down. Obviously that's expected from 99% of modern games, but at the time this was huge. Now, this wasn't entirely new. Descent and Ultimate Underworld did it slightly earlier, however this was the first time that id Software had taken a leap into true 3D, and fans of Doom and Doom 2 were excited. Even I was really excited to try it out because I really enjoyed Doom. Quake starts off with a fun little difficulty selection level, where you pass through the door that corresponds with your desired difficulty. I went for normal. A similar choice is then presented in the next area when you choose which episode to play through. I chose episode 1 because it was first. And I was off. The jump distance and height took a little getting used to, but that was to be expected. This sort of stuff is different in literally every game ever made. I killed my first enemy, and then I found out what I thought was a secret door, but I couldn't see a way to open it. I wasn't going to spend ages looking for secrets. I took the odd detour or backtrack to quickly scope out a location, but I wasn't going to get every secret on every level. In fact, I missed most of them. I killed a couple more enemies and found my first secret, which actually ended up looping around to the door I found earlier. Fucking knew it. I got back on track and tried out the other starting weapon, the axe. It's not great, but I think it's meant to be a last resort just in case you run out of ammo. I never used it again. I found a nail gun and I loved it. The ammo never lasted long, but the damage and range possible were great. The rest of level 1 went as expected. I killed some basic dudes and got to the exit. Level 2 introduced an interesting new enemy, this chainsaw, hand and grenade launcher guy. The enemy variety in general was pretty great. There was some melee, some ranged, some ran, and some even floated about in the air. I continued on through level 2, unlocking a double barrel shotgun, killing a new enemy type, and once again finished with a 100% kill rate. Level 3 started off strong with a grenade launcher and a conveniently placed group of ghouls. The weapon variety in Quake is also top notch. I don't think I actually unlocked them all, but what I did have allowed me to approach every group of demons in multiple ways. I of course got into a bit of a groove, focusing mainly on the shotgun because of its abundance of ammo and my tendency to get quite up close and personal, while saving the nail gun for long range encounters. I got a little confused on level 3 because I accidentally walked past the golden key, but it didn't take too long to realise my mistake, and I was progressing once again. The rest of level 3 was more killing, including a nice duo of jumping kangaroo demon-y looking things. Level 4 introduced quite a lot of swimming, which for a 1996 id Software game felt a little odd, but it was cool still to navigate. I killed a lot more guys, solved the puzzle, and found a secret cave which led on to what I believe is a secret level. Awesome. This secret level featured some really fun low gravity and vertical traversal. Killing enemies while airborne was great fun. However, this is the level where I died first. I went a little gung-ho with a rocket launcher at close range. My bad. I got through the secret level, and a couple more after that. There was this one puzzle that I accidentally kinda skipped through a bit early. It was a dark room with a very thin walkway and I used my muzzle flare to light up the path. However, I later discovered that if I just progressed through the level, it would have lit up anyway. Oh well, I got through it. A couple more puzzles later and I was on to the final level of episode 1. This one felt different. There was a floating rune and not a whole lot else besides some lava. I soon figured out why, as a big bad red dude emerged from the fiery lake and began hurling spicy turds at me. This big boss fight was disappointingly easy. I had 10 times more trouble in the secret level, and even with it being just episode 1 on normal difficulty, I can't imagine it being any harder on the higher difficulty. From what I can see online, the battle doesn't change. You run around in a loop, stepping on pressure plates that lower and activate some electric pylons. Do this a couple times and you win. Overall though, I had a great time blasting my way through the hordes of enemies. It felt like a really fantastic successor to Doom that took the basics and added some more of what people liked. Fun guns, fun enemies, fun levels with fun secrets. My only gripe is the boss battle, but then again, I only tried episode 1, there may be other bosses with way cooler battles. I think it also allows for online co-op, so I might return if I can grab someone for an hour or two. I like RPGs, and Chrono Trigger is probably the one I have seen recommended the most in the comments section. I can kinda see why, even before I tried it. This is not only because it sold millions of copies worldwide, but also because it had some big names on the dev team, like Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, Yuji Horii, the creator of Dragon Quest, and Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball. They were called the Dream Team. Like, come on, you know whatever they make is going to be pretty good. Chrono Trigger was released in 1995 by Square Software, the studio that went on to merge with the Enix Corporation to become Square Enix, a company which I am not too familiar with as I've never played any of the Final Fantasy, Dragon's Quest, Kingdom Hearts or Mana series of games. A few keep appearing in my recommendations, but I'd love to hear which you think I should try first. Now, I am trying the Steam version that includes revamped graphics, sounds, and extra quality of life features like autosave and updated controls. From what I can tell, Chrono Trigger fans seem to think it's a pretty good version, although there have been a few cases of the game crashing. Not a major issue for me. I played Cyberpunk on an Xbox One back when it first released. Well, I tried to play Cyberpunk on an Xbox One. It was bad. The day started with me getting out of bed and heading to the fair, where I obtained some silver by picking the winning racer and completing a simple follow the person challenge in a spooky tent. I then bought a sword and got knocked the fuck out. After regaining consciousness and returning a pendant, the oblivious passerby joined my party. We fought a robot, ate an old man's lunch and got teleported. However, the attention seeker decided to also give it a go, which went well. I followed her through the mysterious portal and appeared in a forest where I proceeded to fight some blueberry flavoured goblins. The combat is pretty cool. It's turn-based, but the characters move around the screen and attack when they're charged up. It makes everything feel more alive and active. Fast forward a little and I arrive at a castle, only to discover that we've gone back in time and our damsel in distress is pretending to be the missing queen. This can only end well. She disappears, the nerd reappears, and we fight some nuns in a cathedral. This is when we meet the Człowiek Zaba, who I decided was Polish for some reason. We continue through the dungeon, interrupting a dinner and killing several inhabitants before making it to the Yakra, the current villain. This boss battle was a fair challenge, and I had to use a good amount of revives, potions, and combo attacks to get through. I did manage to get through it though, saving the queen and our missing person, who turns out to be the future descendant of the queen we just saved, which is why she was able to pull off the whole "I'm the queen" thing. We make it back through the portal to our time and I escort the princess back to the castle. However, this little Dumbledore-looking fuck decides that I'm the problem and accuses me of kidnapping the princess. It goes to court and I'm found guilty and thrown in prison. I did break out and regroup with a techie nerd, but that's where my first play session ended. I loved it, I loved the characters, the story, the combat, all of it. I will definitely be returning to play this some more. Thanks to everyone who recommended it in the comments on my previous videos. This was totally worth the £5 on Steam. Anyway, that does it for this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, and if you have any retro game recommendations or stories of your own, then please leave them in the comments below. I've gotten a few hundred comments and I love reading through them all. And a quick reminder to check out Ravensoup for all sorts of retro gaming videos and live streams. I'll leave some links in the description. One last final thing before I leave. I'm trying to get these out on somewhat of a weekly basis. So far it's kind of like 7, 8 or 9 days to get one out, so keep an eye out. Thanks for watching.